Get ready for a lunar adventure, because today we're diving deep into ispace's Mission 2. This mission could completely change how we think about exploring the moon. We've got a ton of cool stuff to go over. Press releases, info right from ispace's website, mission milestones, and even a sneak peek at the awesome stuff they're sending up.
The really exciting part is that ispace isn't just planning a quick trip. They're setting the stage for us to actually stay on the moon. Their goal is to build a space-based economy by 2040. Think about it. Lunar tourism, fuel stops up there, even a whole lunar city.
Yeah, that's a pretty big dream. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we do have to talk about the launch. It was supposed to happen on January 15th, but it's been pushed back. I checked SpaceX's website, and it looks like they're doing more inspections and reviewing some data.
Yeah, delays like this are kind of normal when you're talking about space exploration. These missions have so many complicated parts, safety has to be the top priority. This delay probably means SpaceX is just being extra careful. They're double-checking everything to make sure the launch is a success.
That makes sense. Space is no joke, so those extra checks are probably a good thing. But it does make you wonder what kind of problems popped up, that they need to fix before it can launch.
It definitely adds a bit more suspense to the whole thing. Oh, and speaking of suspense, let's talk about the company behind this mission, ispace.
They're a global lunar company with offices all over the place. Japan, Europe, and the United States. I really like their slogan, expand our planet, expand our future. It sums up their big vision really well.
And they're going about it in a unique way. They're building both lunar landers and rovers. Their goal is to create a regular and, this is important, affordable way to travel to the moon. It's almost like they're creating a lunar delivery service, opening up so many possibilities.
So Mission 2 is part of something even bigger.
Exactly. Mission 2 is a part of ispace's HAKUTO-R program. It's a whole series of missions all focused on exploring the moon and figuring out how to use its resources. And this isn't their first try. They actually tried to land on the moon back in 2023. They're taking everything they learned from that experience and using it for Mission 2. I think they picked the perfect name for their lander: resilience.
That experience from the previous mission must be super valuable. It seems like learning from both what goes right and wrong is a key part of space exploration.
Absolutely. Every mission, successful or not, gives us data that helps us make our technology better and improve future attempts. It's all about learning and getting better each time. Speaking of which, let's meet the stars of Mission 2, the Resilience Lander and the TENACIOUS Micro Rover. Pretty fitting names, right?
I love the names, especially Tenacious for the rover.
It's
fitting because that rover's mission is to explore the landing site, collect lunar regolith, by the way, that's moon dust for our listeners, and then send all that data back to the lander using its HD camera and, get this, a shovel.
It's a little more high-tech than the shovel you'd use in your garden, but yeah. That rover has a special tool that lets it pick up lunar regolith so we can study it. Understanding what the moon's surface is made of is really important, especially if we want to use its resources and maybe even build habitats there someday.
That's so cool. I can picture this little rover working hard up there. But on top of all that scientific gear, there's another part of this mission that really sparks the imagination: the payloads.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Some of the stuff they're sending up is almost, well, whimsical. But let's start with the practical stuff first.
Okay, like that water electrolyzer from Takasago Thermal Engineering. You mentioned the possibility of fuel depots on the moon. Does this have something to do with that?
Exactly. This electrolyzer is designed to test whether we can extract hydrogen and oxygen from lunar water ice. And remember, hydrogen and oxygen are the key ingredients for rocket fuel.
So we could potentially build a gas station on the moon instead of hauling fuel all the way from Earth.
Exactly. That would make deep space missions so much cheaper and easier to plan. It could completely change space exploration as we know it.
Wow, that's incredible. One little experiment could have such a huge impact on the future of space travel. What else is going along for the ride?
Well, get this. There's a self-contained food production experiment from Euglena Co.
Wait, so they're going to try to grow food on the moon? What are the chances of that actually working?
It's definitely a challenge, but if they pull it off, it would be a huge step toward living on the moon long term. Imagine having fresh food grown right there on the moon.
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it's happening right now. And then there's the Deep Space Radiation Probe from National Central University in Taiwan. This one's really important, right?
Absolutely. We need to understand how radiation works in deep space if we want to keep future astronauts safe. The data from this probe will help scientists develop better ways to protect crews during long missions. It's crucial for making sure those future lunar explorers are safe and healthy.
With all this cutting-edge tech, there's one payload that really caught my eye. It's a bit, well, unexpected. A commemorative alloy plate based on the Charter of the Universal Century from the anime mobile suit Gundam UC.
It's definitely an interesting addition. It might not have anything to do with the mission's science goals, but shows how space exploration affects a culture in a broader way. It reminds us that space exploration isn't just about data and discoveries, it's about inspiring our imaginations.
I love that they're adding bits of pop culture to this serious scientific mission. It makes it feel more relatable somehow.
And it's not just pop culture. The rover is also bringing along a mini model house called Moon House. It's by a Swedish artist named Michael Ginberg.
A miniature house on the moon. I wonder what message the artist was trying to convey.
It's a piece that really makes you think. It asks questions about the role of art and human expression in space. As we venture further out into the cosmos, we have to remember that we're not just explorers. We're storytellers, artists, and dreamers too.
It's a beautiful reminder of the human element in all of this. It's not just about the tech, it's about our dreams, our hopes, and the stories we tell ourselves. And speaking of stories, there's the UNESCO Memory Disk. It has a record of human languages and different cultures from all over the world.
It's a symbolic gesture. It highlights how space exploration is a global effort, something we're all doing together. It's like sending a message to the universe that we're all in this together, united by our curiosity and our desire to explore.
That's a powerful message for sure. And speaking of powerful messages, ISpace has been super transparent about how they're aiming for success. They've created 10 milestones for Mission 2, outlining their goals for each stage, from getting ready for launch to actually establishing a steady presence on the moon.
That transparency is fantastic. It builds trust with the public, it lets everyone follow along on this incredible journey. It takes something that could be very technical and turns it into an experience we can all share.
It's like we're all part of the mission, even from down here on Earth. And this is just the beginning for ISpace. They've already announced Mission 3 for 2026 with the Apex 1.0 lander, and Mission 6 in 2027 with the Series 3 lander. They're clearly serious about making this lunar vision a reality.
It's obvious ISpace is in it for the long haul. They have a vision, and they're carefully working towards it one step at a time. This slow and steady approach is how you build a lasting presence in space. It's not just about one-off missions, it's a slow and steady race to the moon, you could say.
We've covered a lot of ground here. The launch delay, ISpace's big vision, the lander and rover, those awesome payloads, and their commitment to transparency. But before we move on to the mission milestones, I want to hear from you, our listeners. What stood out to you so far? What are you most curious about as we continue this deep dive?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them with us on social media using #TheDeepDive.
Welcome back to our deep dive on ISpace's Mission 2. I bet our listeners are dying to hear more about how this mission is actually going to happen. You're right. Last time, we were totally blown away by all the different payloads going up. We talked about everything from the practical stuff like the water electrolyzer to the more artistic stuff like that Gundam plate and the moon house. It's clear ISpace is thinking big.
For sure. But those payloads are just one part of the story. To really understand how this is all going to work, we need to look at the 10 milestones ISpace has planned out. They're taking a very systematic approach, breaking this super complex mission down into smaller, achievable steps.
It's like a roadmap for success on the moon. So let's start from the beginning. Milestone 1.
Milestone 1 is all about finishing up the launch preparations. And guess what? They've already done it. This milestone covers everything from building the lander and rover to putting all the payloads in place, and of course, a ton of testing, basically making sure everything's good to go for launch day.
It sounds like a crazy complicated process. There must be thousands of things going on at the same time.
Definitely. And a really important part of Milestone 1 is showing they can build and put together these spacecraft in different places around the world. That's really important for future missions. It means they can scale up and work with different countries. It's not just about one company. It's about building a global team for space exploration.
It's amazing to think about all these pieces coming together from all over the place, all working towards one goal. But at some point, all those pieces have to come together for the actual launch. Which brings us to Milestone 2, launch and deployment.
This is where things start to get really exciting. We'll see the Resilience lander separate from that Falcon 9 rocket, and it's off on its own journey to the moon.
I can only imagine how tense it must be in the control room during those moments.
Oh, absolutely. But it's not just about getting the lander safely away from Earth. Milestone 2 is also about collecting important data. They're going to be watching how the lander handles all those intense forces during launch. That information will help them improve the designs for future missions. They're using every single launch as a chance to learn.
So the journey doesn't really start until the lander separates from the rocket.
Right, once it's on its own, that lander has to show it can work properly in the harsh environment of space. That's what milestone 3 is all about. Establishing a stable operating state. That means deploying those solar panels, activating communication systems, and making sure all the systems on board are running smoothly.
Like taking a deep breath before jumping in the pool, making sure everything is in order for that long journey.
Exactly. It's all about being in control and having good communication before heading off to the moon. And speaking of heading off, that leads us to milestone 4, the first orbital control maneuver.
So that's when the lander actually starts going towards the moon. I'm guessing they need some pretty serious math skills to pull this off.
You're absolutely right. This is where Space's navigation team really gets to shine. They'll be using the lander's propulsion system to adjust its path and aim it towards the moon. It's kind of like setting sail on a giant cosmic ocean, charting a course using physics and the way things move in orbit.
It's amazing how they can figure out these maneuvers so precisely, especially considering the incredible distances involved.
It shows how far we've come with space navigation and how skilled Space's engineers are. But getting to the moon isn't a straight shot. At about a month after launch, we come to milestone 5, the lunar flyby.
A flyby. What happens during that?
This is the lander's first close encounter with the moon. It's going to swing past the moon, using its gravity to adjust its course and get ready to orbit, kind of like a cosmic slingshot. They're using the moon's gravity to change the lander's direction.
That's so cool. It sounds like this delicate dance between the spacecraft and the moon's gravity.
It really is, and it all comes down to perfect timing and calculations. But the lunar flyby is just a step towards the main event. Lunar orbit insertion, or LOI, and that's what milestone 6 is all about, getting ready for LOI.
So they have to do even more maneuvers before the lander actually starts orbiting the moon.
Yep, there are a few more. Milestone 6 involves a bunch of deep space maneuvers. They're all designed to fine-tune the lander's path, making sure it comes at the moon from the right angle and at the right speed for a smooth transition into orbit.
It's like threading a needle in space.
That's a great way to put it. They need incredible precision and control, especially since this is all happening millions of miles away from Earth. But if all goes according to plan, these maneuvers will lead to milestone 7, entering lunar orbit.
And that's when the lander officially becomes a satellite of the moon.
Exactly. This milestone shows is space can deliver stuff to lunar orbit. And that's super important for creating a permanent base on the moon. It's a big step towards their space-based economy idea.
It's exciting to think we're getting closer to that vision with each milestone. But we're not on the surface yet, right?
Not quite. We still have a few more critical steps to go. Once that lander is safely in orbit around the moon, milestone 8 is about making tiny adjustments to its orbit. They need to get it into the perfect spot for landing.
Like circling the target, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.
Precisely. And then comes the big moment, the one everyone's been waiting for, milestone 9, the lunar landing sequence. This is when that resilience lander tries to make a soft touchdown on the moon's surface.
That's got to be the most nerve-wracking part of the whole mission.
You bet. It's the culmination of years of work, planning, and some incredible technology. Every little detail has to be perfect. From picking the landing site to the final descent maneuvers, there's almost no room for mistakes.
If they nail this landing, it'll be a huge accomplishment.
Absolutely. It'll show how amazing Space's engineers are, and it'll be a big step forward for private companies doing lunar exploration. And if that landing is successful, we get to the final milestone, milestone 10, establishing a steady system on the moon.
What does that involve exactly?
It means turning on the lander, letting the TENACIOUS rover loose, and activating all those amazing payloads we talked about earlier. It's the start of the science part of the mission.
So that's when the real fun begins.
You got it. We're going to see a flood of data and images as that rover starts exploring and collecting lunar regolith. It's like opening a new chapter in lunar exploration, all driven by innovation and the thirst for discovery.
It shows how far we've come with space tech, and how companies like ispace are leading the way in exploring new frontiers. They're not just following in the footsteps of governments, they're blazing their own trail.
It's a really exciting time to be following space exploration. And as we watch ispace work through these 10 milestones, we need to remember what it all means for the future.
That's a great point. We've been so focused on the technical stuff, we haven't really talked about the bigger picture. What does a successful Mission 2 mean for all of us back here on Earth?
That's an excellent question, and one we'll dig into in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey with ispace's Mission 2. From that initial launch delay to figuring out all those complicated maneuvers, It's been amazing to explore both the technical and the ambitious sides of getting to the moon.
Yeah, it really has. And while we've been admiring the tech and celebrating those ambitious milestones, it's important to take a step back and think about the big picture. As we venture further out into space, we're not just solving engineering problems. We're starting a whole new chapter of human activity beyond Earth.
And that brings up some really big questions, doesn't it? Questions about how we manage resources, protect the environment out there, and even how we preserve the moon's cultural and historical importance.
Exactly. It's exciting to imagine a future with lunar bases and space-based economies, but we have to be careful about how we do it. We have to make sure that everything we do in space benefits all of humanity, not just a select few.
It's like discovering a new continent, but on a cosmic scale. We can't just make the same mistakes we've made in the past. We need to learn from history and create a plan for responsible and sustainable space exploration.
I couldn't agree more. Take lunar resources, for example. Who owns those resources? Is it a free-for-all, or should there be international rules about how we extract and use them? These aren't easy questions, and they require careful thought and global cooperation.
It makes you think about resources here on Earth, like oil or minerals. We've seen firsthand how conflict and environmental damage can happen, especially when these resources are exploited without a plan or regulations.
Exactly. And the stakes are even higher when we're talking about resources on another celestial body. We need to establish clear rules and ethical guidelines before we start large-scale extraction.
And it's not just about managing resources. We also need to consider how our activities will impact the moon's environment.
You're right. The moon might seem like a barren, lifeless place, but it has its own delicate ecosystem. Lunar dust, for instance, can be really harsh on equipment. And there's the issue of contamination. We have to be incredibly careful not to introduce Earth-based life or pollutants. We could really disrupt the lunar environment.
It's a reminder that even in space, we have a responsibility to protect the environment. We're not just visitors anymore, we're becoming inhabitants, and we need to act like it.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the cultural and historical significance of the moon. For centuries, it's been a source of wonder and inspiration for so many cultures. How do we balance scientific exploration with preserving that heritage?
That's a really important point. Imagine a future where lunar landing sites become tourist attractions, or where mining operations disrupt places that are important culturally or scientifically. We need to find a balance between progress and preservation, respecting the moon's past as we shape its future.
These are complex issues, and there's no easy solutions. But the good news is that people are talking about them. Scientists, policymakers, ethicists, even artists, they're all coming together to address these challenges and to develop guidelines for responsible space exploration.
It's a collaborative effort that needs open communication and international cooperation. And that's where you, our listeners, come in. We want to know what you think about these ethical and societal questions. What are your hopes and concerns about the future of humans on the moon?
Tell us what you think. Share your thoughts on social media using #TheDeepDive. Your voices are a crucial part of this conversation.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into iSpace's Mission 2, we're left feeling both excited and responsible. It's incredible to see humanity reaching further into the cosmos, but we have to move forward carefully and thoughtfully.
We're not just launching rockets and rovers. We're launching a new era for humanity. And it's up to all of us to make sure this era is defined by collaboration, by sustainability, and by a deep respect for the universe around us.
It's a challenge that demands our best. It calls on our ingenuity, our compassion, and our shared commitment to a future where humanity thrives, not just on Earth, but among the stars.
Until next time, keep looking up, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the wonders of the universe.